most of the multi-millionaires in the US are not hedge fund managers or tech guys. Most of the multi-millionaires are people who run boring businesses, but we need them critically. They are...
I've actually talked with Rod about this a couple of times. I think every meeting we have, at the end we talk. But I want to talk about how income and education are related. With everything happening, how jobs are changing with AI, essentially, if a university degree is still worth it, right? How is that going to shape the future? It's going to be more technical degrees. How is it going to change? So I want to see how education, if it's still significant to have a higher income. You guys can see education income. Education is 28% and age is 24%. So it's basically the same.
The one thing I did want to mention is the relationship between relationship and education is something I noted there. And I'm interested in knowing what time frame was this data taken in? And is this relationship between relationship and education, is it still prevalent now? Or is it something that was historically prevalent? And are we going to see a shift based on work environments? For example, one big example in Japan, they're not getting married enough and they're having a population crisis. Same with China. Ever since they implemented the one-child policy, it worked great. They slowed their population growth and it stagnated. And then what happened was that they found that because people were less likely to have kids, a lot of young couples just decided not to have them and started going into careers more heavily. And they actually started doing the polar opposite in China and encouraging, and I think they're doing this in Japan as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I wonder what things like AI are going to do to us, whether it's going to facilitate our ability to have relationships or stifle them because we have unrealistic expectations of a sycophantic AI. It could be either way. It could be that we're left with all this excess time and it makes it easier. Yeah, fascinating. Let's look at the model probabilities here just to understand.
For sure.
Okay. So interesting. Yeah. It's not as smooth as I would have expected.
Yeah, it's not, but perhaps that's because of what kind of education it is. That's not being accounted for in this two-dimensional view. Because, well, there seems to be a peak around 11 and 12 years. Maybe that's like a different kind of education to 10 and 13 and 14 years.
Well, yeah, I wonder if this is US based, 12 is high school. And then there's a step function and not much of a difference between people who do a 1-year or 2-year college course. Like in the US, say you want to be an airline pilot, you do a 2-year college course. Then you get some flying hours on something small, and then you eventually fly around in great big jets. And you can do really well. You can also do really well as a plumber, as an electrician, an HVAC specialist, and especially if you learn the skills to not only do the job, but then manage a small business. Wall Street Journal recently had a big article about how most of the multimillionaires in the US are not hedge fund managers or tech guys. Most of the multimillionaires are people who run boring businesses, but we need them critically. They are large-scale farmers or people who run warehousing businesses or bottle distribution businesses or that kind of stuff. And a lot of them don't have the 4-year college degrees, the full BA. A lot of them have 1 or 2-year associate degrees.
That's going to be impacted by AI as well. I think my read on the situation, again, just not an expert, but I think that with AI, the bar will be raised for the amount of education that everyone will need because it will be so much easier to access. And a higher education, as we saw, things like the internet commoditized access to education, and it became so much easier for people to become educated without getting a formal degree. And I think AI just amplifies that impact because it's even easier to access information. You don't need to learn how to use the internet to find the information you want. But for better or for worse, you're relying on ChatGPT to give you an answer that you hope is correct and it sources it in the right way. So with these boring businesses, I think that a lot of I don't know if the education numbers are going to go down or up, or how we're even going to quantify how educated someone is anymore, because is a formal degree relatively the same kind of difference in education as someone who's uneducated in in terms of not having a formal education anymore, because both have access to AI, which gives them a higher a bar from which to start from.
Yeah, I think that's it. Do we then have to measure people by other skills, their organizational capacity, their sheer grit, the entrepreneurial drive to keep going, or their emotional intelligence to be able to coordinate and work in a big group, and especially across disparate groups with different types of cultures and behaviors. Imagine if you're running a paving business, you need to talk with lawyers and accountants and customers, and the level of profanity might be different than when you're talking with your crew, but maybe the same emotional intelligence is needed at all levels. Yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating. This is really cool, Nicholas. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.